Instagram Stories for Friday, April 4th. I'm your host, Daniel Hill. This is the weekend edition of the Instagram Stories. Today on the show, we're going to be sharing the latest update about TikTok and the ban in the United States, as well as doing a deeper dive into something I mentioned on the Wednesday Waffle. Sarah Wynn-Williams, a former global policy director at Facebook, has released a book which I have been reading, and it is quite the expose of what it's like to be inside Facebook at a very high level. I'm going to be sharing some of the clips from a recent interview that she did, not only talking about the things that she experienced firsthand, but the larger implications of what those things mean with respect to politics, tech, and a lot more. All of that and more on today's episode, but first, here's a quick word from our sponsors. Welcome back. Let's start with the biggest news of the day, which has to do with the upcoming potential TikTok ban. President Trump posted on Truth Social a long paragraph giving an update on TikTok and the timeline. Here it is. Quote, "My administration has been working very hard on a deal to save TikTok, and we have made tremendous progress. The deal requires more work to ensure all necessary approvals are signed, which is why I am signing an executive order to keep TikTok up and running for an additional 75 days. We hope to continue working in good faith with China, who I understand are not very happy about our reciprocal tariffs, parentheses, necessary for fair and balanced trade between China and the USA, end parentheses. This proves that tariffs are the most powerful economic tool and very important to our national security. We do not want TikTok to go dark. We look forward to working with TikTok and China to close the deal. Thank you for your attention to this matter." End quote. I will link to this post on Truth Social so you can read it for yourself. Let's move on to our next topic, which has to do with Facebook and Meta as a whole. On Wednesday, I mentioned that I was reading a book by Sarah Wynn-Williams, a former global policy director at Facebook. She had been at Facebook for a number of years and had worked very closely with Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg. In her new book, which is entitled Careless People, A Cautionary Tale of Power, Greed, and Lost Idealism, she gives a number of stories showing what it was like behind the curtain on some of the decisions that the team at Facebook, primarily Mark Zuckerberg, was making and the impacts that those changes and decisions were having. I will say up front that I have not finished reading this book yet. I'm about 2/3 of the way through, but I have listened to a couple of interviews with Sarah Wynn-Williams. I'm going to share two specific instances she gives of extremely concerning behavior inside Facebook and Meta. The first has to do with how Facebook viewed teenagers and the way they posted on the platform and then advertised to them. Here's the clip of Sarah Wynn-Williams explaining this and why it was so problematic.
So that younger audience, 13 to 17-year-olds, is incredibly valuable to Meta. That's an audience that advertisers really want to be able to reach. And Meta, with Instagram and WhatsApp and Facebook, is a really great place for advertisers to reach teenagers. And so the company is always trying to push further and further in the tools it develops to meet what advertisers want, to meet those needs. One of the things that I learned while I was there was that, so they developed up the ability to be able to target a teenager when they're feeling worthless and let advertisers know that information so that they can target an ad. So to give you an example, if a 13-year-old girl deletes a selfie, she looks at the selfie and she's like, I don't actually want this on my Insta. I don't feel great about it. That's information that the company was able to take, and they were able to provide that as research to a beauty advertiser. Because to that beauty advertiser, they know that the moment that teen girl is feeling worthless is a really good time, from their perspective, to serve them a beauty advertisement. And that makes me feel sick. And the other thing that surprises me, and I was very shocked during my time in Silicon Valley, is how few of the executives allowed their teens to use the products. So to me, that tells me that they know. When I learned about it, I was exchanging with my team. It's like, how how could this be the case? How can it be that you want to target young mothers or teenagers feeling worthless? I mean, this is one of the most valuable companies in the world. They have so much money. They don't need any more. They don't need to do.
I'm going to pause the interview there and just say that that level of targeting is not something that I personally think is okay. I try to keep my opinions and politics out of this show as much as possible, but one of the things that I do always emphasize is the importance of keeping teens safe on all platforms as much as humanly possible. Another part of what Sarah Wynn-Williams shares has to do with how Facebook viewed China. China has become such a key part of this technology discussion because if you talk to people who are not fans of TikTok, they will say that a good reason not to use TikTok is because the Chinese government could access your data. In this interview, Sarah Wynn-Williams explains the lengths that the team at Facebook was willing to go to appease the Chinese Communist Party. Stick around for that clip. Welcome back. Here's Sarah Wynn-Williams, a former global public policy director at Facebook, talking about the lengths that the team at Facebook was willing to go to appease the Chinese Communist Party to get Facebook launched there. Here's the clip.
Last year, without even being in the China market, Meta made over $18 billion from China. This is an incredibly important market to Facebook today. It underpins the value of the company and it underpins the future growth of the company. 2 years ago, China was worth $7 billion to Meta. So it is doubling in a very short amount of time. That is the growth trajectory for the company. And yet people seem to operate under the assumption that Meta is not having any financial benefit from China. So it's an incredibly, valuable market to Meta across so many of its products, with, WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, its virtual reality play, its AI play. I mean, it's got many different products that would benefit from being in the Chinese market.
I'm just going to pause it there for a quick second. Now that you understand the context of why China was so important to Mark Zuckerberg and the team at Facebook, here's Sarah Wynn-Williams explaining the lengths that the team at Facebook was willing to go to in order to appease the Chinese government.
What concessions was Zuckerberg willing to make in order to operate and get into China?
He was willing to meet the specifications of the Chinese Communist Party, including their very specific content moderation demands.
And when other countries asked for the same concessions, what was his reaction?
Absolutely not. There are so many times that governments would come to us, not just on the question of censorship, although often on the question of censorship, and say, can you store data in our country? Can you show us how facial recognition works? Can you show us how photo tagging works? Can you take down this activist's profile? We don't like what he's saying. It's difficult for the government. And in all of those instances, we would say, no, I'm sorry. We can't show you how photo tagging works behind the scenes. We can't sit you down with our engineering team. That's technology that is known only to us. We're happy to explain it, but we're not going to show you behind the scenes. And yet, with the Chinese Communist Party, it was just pulling back the curtain, giving them these detailed briefings, giving them the latest, whether that's on, artificial intelligence or infrastructure, like how you build the infrastructure to support the internet. It was very much trying to meet every request that the Chinese Communist Party.
But how would he think he was ever going to get away with that?
He really believed that Meta was going to get into China. He really believed that by making these concessions, he would show them his commitment to getting into this market.
Okay, I'm going to stop the interview there. If you want to read Sarah's book, which I highly recommend, you can get to it directly from the link that I'm going to include in the show notes. Additionally, I will link to that interview, so if you want to watch it yourself, you can. That is going to do it for today's episode. As always, thank you so much for listening, and be sure to come back on Monday, where we break down what the head of Instagram, Adam Mosseri, shared on his Ask Me Anything.
Let me tell you a couple things that you should know about me. A product manager, but do not have a bachelor's degree. But actually that's factually a fraction of me. And other fractions posting content irregular and irrationally. Still probably won't get a job at the gram. They forgot, they don't know, or don't care who I am. That's why you never see me at the parties and events. My lack of followers must make me irrelevant. Don't have a course, a book to sell to make a bag of grand. Not a social media marketer, don't represent any brands. Plain to see, don't have an agency, but I got a lot of spam. Just putting in the work, without the glitz and glam. Won't catch me eating fish, unless it's shrimp or clam. No six pack, no risk that, there's a gym card in my hand. Don't have a full-time job, but I got a lot of plans. Stay plotting, dropping knowledge on TikTok and Instagram.